So, when you lose in a game or losing is possible, how does that make you feel exactly? I feel like this answer can be pretty game dependent, but at the end of all that, the feeling of having lost might stick with you for a little bit. And when it comes on to fighting games, I feel like that feeling of loss cuts a little bit deeper because there's not much you can do other than blame yourself. And that might sound a little harsh, but after a certain point of experience, you start to realize that most of the time when you lose, there was most likely something you could have done in those situations that would have at the very least put you at an advantage, if not getting you the win. Whereas a team-based game, you can place the blame between like 2 or 5 other people, and it's much easier to shift that blame because there's multiple parties, and nobody can truly know who's at fault. When it comes down to losing, when it happens at the right place and at the right time, it can dramatically shift how you see the concept as a whole. When I was younger, I used to lose a lot to my older brother in Tekken 4 and Marvel 2, so when I formally got into fighting games as I got older, I was still used to losing, but being older, I was able to figure out my way around these fighting games and their mechanics, and so after that, losing over time became more of a learning experience. However, that still doesn't make it feel any better. I feel like in most games now, you're not really given enough time to truly take in the win or the loss and like understand how it happened. And I feel like that's probably because of queue times and the whole matchmaking system, but I'm not too knowledgeable on that, so I'm not really going to touch on it. But when it comes down to fighting games, I don't know what it is, but it's almost like this crazy witch's brew of elements that come together to make that loss sting even more. Not only do you have to listen to the narrator sit there and tell you in a very disappointed tone that you lose, but now you have to listen to the character that just beat the hell out of your character yap on with some cheeky voice line about how they're better than you. And then, if you were playing a ranked match, you then have to watch all your rank points go down. And then if you D-rank, you now have to watch the cooler PNG get turned into a not so cool PNG. And once all that's said and done, you get booted right back into the queue, and you have to wait for your next match, which is probably just enough time to let it sink in that you just got absolutely bodied and there was nothing you could do about it. In the process of learning these games, you will most definitely lose a lot, and you might end up losing so much that it's probably going to end up feeling useless to try to move on at the end of the day. But everyone who's played fighting games for a while understands that losing isn't so bad in the long run. And what I mean by that is, losing doesn't exactly mean you're bad, it just means you still have a little bit more to learn. Think about it like this. If you've ever tried to learn how to skateboard, I can almost guarantee someone has probably told you something along the lines of, you gotta get used to falling or something like that. And while that sounds awful to think about, as a fighting game player and someone who likes to skateboard very often, it's very true, because when you attempt to get on that board for the first time, you are not going to have the balance to be able to stand upright, and you are most likely going to fall. With fighting games, it's the same concept. Like, if you truly want to learn how to get better at fighting games, you really do have to learn how to embrace losing with open arms and understand that when it's looked at under the right lens, it can really help you grow as a player. So, you just experienced your first big loss in a fighting game, and yes, I did say first, and it's got you feeling kind of funny. And I'm not talking about the hee hee ha ha kind of funny, I'm talking the kind of funny where someone just turned off your main theme kind of funny. And the more you think about it, it's actually not funny at all. It's actually got you feeling kind of salty. You know, on one hand, sure, you lose in fighting games all the time, no big deal. But on the other hand, when you lose in such a fashion where you can't do anything about it, nah, you can't let that happen again. Referencing an earlier video of mine, this just might be the beginning of one of your first training arcs, honestly. This is where your character development starts to take off as a fighting game player, and you start to understand your actual character and the things that you can do and the things that you can't do as a player. For some players, it's pretty unfortunate, but the only way to make it to these points is to get a beatdown from time to time. And in a way, when you get done with your training arc, you should be pretty humble, because you should have come to terms with the idea that in the fighting game world, sometimes you're going to come up against a wall you're not going to be able to scale so easily. When it comes down to losing, it can be pretty tough to take it in stride, especially in a fighting game, but once you learn how to, the process of playing and even learning becomes so much easier. So much so, you might even start to seek out people who play just to see how much you have learned and how much you can still learn. I feel like once you reach this point, you start to embody the spirit of characters like Ryu or Goku. You know the type of character I'm talking about, the wandering warrior archetype. I also feel as though at this point for a lot of players, the initial training arc that they went on is probably complete. And with that comes the understanding that defeat does not define who you are as a player, and your skill level can always change. Losing, though it might not seem like it in the moment, is pretty important. It's such an integral part to the fighting game experience because it gives you a very clear goal to achieve. You obviously want to be better than you were in the moment that you lost. Simple stuff, right? But how does one go about getting better exactly? It can be pretty tough to figure out where you need work at, but this is where the community part comes into play in the fighting game community. I've said this before, but it doesn't hurt to remind people, the FGC wants to see the newer players succeed. At times, it might not feel like it, but that's just how these games work. Someone has to lose, and because of the competitive nature, it's going to feel really bad when that person is you. And if you do find yourself losing pretty often, don't be afraid to reach out and ask people what's going on, because a lot of the times in fighting games, you can find yourself falling into a lot of bad habits which stem from you just being on autopilot. For example, in a game like Street Fighter, if you're constantly jumping in on somebody and that player knows what they're doing, they're probably going to punish you with the anti-air. Therefore, you should probably switch to a more grounded approach and only jump when you absolutely think it's necessary. Or in a 3D fighter like Tekken, if you're not sidestepping enough, another player who's extremely skilled with movement can put you in a corner with just that alone, and on any map, if you're in a corner in Tekken, that's a pretty rough spot to be in. And I understand that the idea of reaching out to the person who just beat you in a fighting game can be pretty scary, but 9 times out of 10, the person on the other end will most likely have absolutely no problem trying to help you figure out where to improve, because as it goes with fighting games, they've probably been where you're at. And it's because of that fact that these players have no problem lending an extra set of eyes or maybe a couple minutes for practice rounds, because they also understand that as a fighting game player, sometimes you really do need another player to point out some of the things that you may not be able to see on your own. Something else that might be holding you back is, honestly, yourself. Sometimes you might get in your own head just a little too much and trick yourself into thinking that you're not sweet like that, when in reality, you really are sweet like that. And this might sound like some believe in yourself type nonsense, but you really do just have to sit back, get out of your own head and let yourself know, I can definitely beat this person, no problem. You gotta try to keep a level head about it, and I know that might be hard, but what I mean by that is try to learn something solid if you think you're about to lose. And what I mean by solid is something you can take away from that loss and integrate it into your gameplay to help you rather than hinder you. Now, full transparency, I am absolutely no pro player, so my advice may not be the best, but I can tell you that being patient in most situations in fighting games usually pays off pretty well. A good example of this would be if you're in a match, right, and you and your opponent are super low on health. On one hand, you might be the type of person who just sits there and waits for your opponent to come towards you, or on the other hand, you could be the type of person who's jumping all around, moving back and forth, throwing out random attacks and all that stuff because you're panicking and you're scared. And if you find yourself becoming a crack-addled scroll when your health gets low in a fighting game, don't feel too bad, because think about it in the terms of an FPS. 9 times out of 10, if you're getting shot at, you're not going to let someone just sit there and Swiss cheese you, right? Probably not. Most likely you're going to end up trying to strafe or do a crouch slide if the game allows it, or just any kind of movement to make sure the bullets aren't hitting you directly. And if you're not used to playing fighting games like that, when you find yourself pushed into a corner, the one thing that you can do really is just start moving around and hopefully throw your opponent off. And as with anything in relation to fighting games, it's never so simple as just moving around to distract your opponent, because if you're so low on health and your opponent catches you while you're moving around haphazardly, that could spell the end for your character. So if there's anything you can glean from all of this, panic halts underlying chances of KO. Or, fuck. no real denying it, when you play fighting games, you will eventually get salty, but that's not exactly a bad thing. You have to eventually learn how to treat salt as a motivator, and sure, it doesn't feel good initially, but the second you get over that hump, you'll bounce back tenfold. And in the moment, losing sucks, but afterwards, you can make that comeback and become a much better player because of it. It's pretty easy to sleep on yourself when it comes to fighting games, and I genuinely believe the reason for that is because just starting off, nobody really tells you how to go about losing, and most of the popular content you see from people in the fighting game community is usually from the way higher level players. And I wanted to make this video, and really all of my videos, for people at the beginner and intermediate levels, mostly because I feel like these are the areas where most people are a little shaky on these kinds of games, and they might not be as confident in their skills as they should be. And you know what, honestly, that's pretty understandable when you end up seeing what some of these other players can do, but at the same time, you shouldn't discount yourself or the skills that you've acquired over your time of playing the game. You're definitely a much better player than you think you are, and honestly, you just don't see it because, simply put, you just don't give yourself enough credit. And if you're not giving yourself enough credit, then you might end up failing to appreciate the smaller victories you achieve from time to time. Maybe you're not getting crazy 80 to 90% combos or these crazy perfect games, but at least you're not jumping into anti-airs, you're not running headlong into fireballs, you're not blocking with your face as much. It's all the small things that you do that add up over time when it comes to fighting games. And for all those people skipping around because this video is too long and you didn't watch, losing overall helps improve your gameplay. The better your gameplay, the better you'll be able to understand and interact with the system mechanics. The better you'll understand and interact with the system mechanics, the more enjoyment you'll be able to get out of the game. The more enjoyment you'll be able to get out of the game means you'll be playing for longer, and thus your skill improves as time goes on. I hope this video made losing in fighting games seem a lot more welcoming, because when it comes down to losing, really, nobody wants to lose. That's literally why we're playing fighting games to get better, is so that we don't lose. But at the same time, after playing for a long time, you start to understand that losing just really isn't that big of a deal, and it's literally just part of the learning experience. But dear viewer, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up for your sake, because while I'm sure you enjoy listening to me ramble on Forrest Gump style about how to deal with defeat and other various fighting game jargon, I'm sure you have better things to do also. So, with that being said, I hope this video finds you well, and I hope you have a nice day, night, and the rest of your life. Thank you so very much for watching, and I greatly appreciate it.